All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I see we have a couple more participants streaming in, so I just want to say thank you for bearing with us. Hope everyone is staying safe and sound, especially during this inclement weather today. I know that we've had a couple close calls with our electricity and Wi-Fi. So just so everyone is aware, this meeting will be recorded. It will be available on Monday. So if you aren't able to stay with us for the whole time, we'll make sure that this is available to you all. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Caron, and I work in NORD's membership department. I will be your host for today's discussion, although I will certainly not be the only person that you see today. Today's discussion is how you can help in patient-driven research in rare cancers, and we have an incredible panel of speakers. I just want to take a moment again to thank them and all of you for joining us on this Rare Cancer Day 2024. Rare Cancer Day, as many of you already know, is a day where we can come together as a community and highlight the challenges faced by those affected by rare cancers and the need for further research to alleviate those challenges. Today, we're going to explore how patient advocacy groups can manage their own patient registries and how those registries can empower patients and researchers to overcome challenges faced by people affected by rare cancers. This webinar is being brought to you today by NORD's fantastic education team, who regularly provide free educational webinars for patients and caregivers in the rare community. We're so happy for all of our participants who've been able to join us today, and we hope you can continue to join us in future sessions as well. For anyone who's joining us for the first time, I just want to explain a little bit that NORD is an independent nonprofit that supports patients and patient advocacy organizations by providing opportunities for further education and research in rare diseases. Our Rare Cancer Coalition is just one of the ways that NORD works to unite advocacy organizations to collaborate on issues facing their communities. I'll talk a little bit more about the coalition at the end of our conversation today, but for now, I would like to turn to our agenda and introduce our speakers. If we don't mind going to the agenda slide. Perfect. It's short and sweet. So in just a moment, I will introduce our panelists and invite our first speaker to begin. We'll have a presentation from each of our panelists who will share their experiences with designing and managing their patient registries, and then we'll have time for questions and answers from our panelists afterwards. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to provide us with some of your questions, and we'll try to organize them as best as we can ahead of the Q&A section. After that, we'll provide just a little more information about our Rare Cancer Coalition and how you can contact NORD for further support and information. If we don't mind going to the speaker slides, I'll just do a quick introduction so everyone knows who we're going to be talking with today. Our first speaker is going to be Janet Mauro. She is our I Am Rare implementation co-lead here at NORD. Janet guides new I Am Rare registry owners through all aspects of protocol and study development. She works to help ensure that their study goals are met while protecting the privacy and confidentiality of the participant. And Janet also helps support all registry clients on regulatory questions and IRB activities. So Janet is going to be our first speaker. She's going to explain to us what a registry is, how you can get involved, and some of the components that go into developing those registries. After her, we're going to hear from Jeffrey Kramer, who's the president of the Chondrosarcoma Foundation, and Denise Robinson, who's the executive director and director of research at the EHE Foundation. And I'll make sure to introduce both of them ahead of each of their presentations too, so that way we don't have to memorize any names here. All right. And with that, I just want to thank you all for giving me a moment, and I will turn these slides over to Janet. Thank you, Janet.
Thank you, Alex, for including me in this forum. It really is an honor for me to be here. Today, I'm going to be touching on what patient registries and natural history studies are, what a patient advocacy group needs to be ready to create their own study, and why gathering the patient's journey, your journey, directly from you is so important. Please note, in research, we don't typically use the word patient to describe the person in a trial because that implies that the research treatment will provide a cure or modification of symptoms. Instead, we call this person a participant. But the area of cancer research is different, as often the patients will enter early phase trials with the hope that the experimental therapy will provide a positive outcome, as well as answering research questions. For this presentation, though, I will be using the words patient and participant interchangeably. So what is a patient registry? It can be many things, but the definition is a collection of standardized information about a group of patients with a shared condition. The patients respond to the same questions asked in the same way. Registry data may be participant-entered responses to surveys. Your clinician might have a registry where they enter their own data, or it could be a blend of sources, including the entry of medical records into the registry itself. Some uses for this data might be to have a contact registry, which is simply a list of people who are interested perhaps in participating in clinical trials and how to contact them. It might be used for clinical trial development. Somebody looking to start a trial on a particular investigational drug may want to see some data as to what are the needs of the patients outside of what they know from the medical records. It could be used as preparation for a patient-focused drug development meeting with the FDA, and it could be used for natural history studies. If you'd go to the next slide, please. A natural history study tracks the course of a disease over time through data collected in a patient registry. Participants are asked to return to the registry at set time points to enter new information. Sometimes you might be invited in to come return every 6 months, sometimes annually, to answer that set of questions. In the natural history study, though, participants are asked to complete a set of surveys on many topics. They include the diagnostic journey, treatments they may have used, medical and family history. They'll ask about your demographics and the effect of having the disease on your quality of life. This information comes from the patient's experience and point of view and includes both objective and subjective information. This is distinct from other types of registries where the physician's view of their patient is collected or where the data is brought in from the medical record. If you go to the next slide. Thank you. Here are some common goals for patient advocacy groups and patients or their caregivers into why they should build and participate in a registry. It's to collect and provide information that has not been well documented from the point of view of the patient or the caregiver. That doesn't happen very often. It's to build a repository of data that comes directly from the patient. It's used to attract the interest of researchers, industry, and the FDA, and to help achieve a cure or modification of symptoms at some point in the future from the information that patients provide. As a patient advocacy group, you would be designing your protocol and you design your surveys with the aim of finding answers to research questions important to your specific community. Next slide, please. So why should you have a patient registry as a patient advocacy group? Well, you know the patient experience of the disease you represent best. You have the broadest perspective because you work daily with patients and their caregivers. You hear from them, you know their stories. You work with medical professionals and researchers as they look for answers and better treatment. And industry wants to attract your patients, the members of your patient advocacy group, to fill their clinical trials. You're a valuable resource in that you have so many people in your advocacy group who have a similar goal. They want cures. If you would go to the next slide, please. So then usually patient groups, they ask us, are we ready? What do we need? We suggest that at minimum, you have at least 2 volunteers or employees who can dedicate themselves to the tasks ahead. The more hands, the better. You want to have a subset of your medical advisory group who are interested in working with you on this project. And most importantly, you want to have 2 to 3 patients or caregivers who are going to be the voice of your membership on the decisions being made. When you're working on this registry right from the inception, it does take a lot of time to set up, but the time varies depending on what the project is that's at hand, whether it's working on your protocol or if it's working on the surveys themselves. But you'll also need to make sure that you have people who are willing to stay with the project after the registry has launched, because then you're going to need people to help the participants actually get into the registry and answer questions if they're not sure of how to answer certain things. You'll also want to have people who are comfortable on the computer, who will be able to look at the data and go from there. Next slide, please. This is a question that we're often asked here at NORD. How do we choose a platform provider? What should we look for? There are lots of registry choices out there. When shopping for a registry platform, the first thing that I would suggest, read the fine print really well. You're going to want to know who determines what is going to be done with the data that you collect. Will your group be making the decisions, or will the platform provider do this? If the latter, you'll want to know what the platform provider is going to do with that data, and does your group have any say in that? Ask what kind of data you're going to receive once you start accruing participants. Is it at the individual patient level, or is it only blended data with no identifiers? If it's at the patient level, will you be able to communicate with the participants who are voluntarily sharing their personal information, or are you only going to get a random participant number? Read how the data, including the patient's personal identifying information, will be protected. Do they make it easy for your participants to understand what they are literally signing up for? Is there a consent? On NORD's I Am Rare platform, the patient advocacy group is the owner of and the decision maker about how to share the data that's collected by your group. Next slide, please. So I know that there are also patients and caregivers on this call. So the first thing is, of course, why should I participate? The reason that we ask you to participate is to make sure that we can collect your lived experience. It's so important to capture first-person information, or at the very least, the information provided by a legally authorized representative if the survey is mostly about a disease that happens with children. And you can work with the patient advocacy group to ensure that the things that you want to tell researchers about your journey are included. You'll want to ask the same questions as the patient advocacy group in terms of what should you be looking for. You want to be provided with an informed consent document before you start surveys, and you'll want to read it and make sure all your questions are answered before you agree to continue and provide your valuable personal information. So you want to know what the registry is going to ask me to input into the surveys. You're going to want to know what's going to happen to the info that you provide and who the data is being shared with, also how it's going to be protected. Next slide, please. This is always a very important question. How is my data going to be protected? The NORD I Am Rare registry platform and the information participants contribute is very safe. It's stored and backed up on encrypted servers. We're compliant with US and international privacy regulations, including HIPAA and GDPR. The consent form you sign before supplying information to a registry should explain all the ways that your data is going to be protected and shared. It's important that the information you provide is kept together as belonging to a single person so that your experience can be seen as a whole. And this can be done by adding a random numeric code that masks your identity. So instead of being John Brown, you might be 5234. This code, which might be shared depending on the level of the data request, will not allow researchers to link the data back to you. Registry data might be requested for many reasons: by collaborative researchers from industry and academia, as preliminary data to be used for a grant, or to inform the design of a clinical trial. If blended data is sufficient for the researcher's project, so that might be as simple as how many men, how many women have this diagnosis. It would just be a blend of all the answers of all the participants. If that is all that's needed, then that is all that's going to be supplied to the researcher. If the research needs more detail, the data is going to be de-identified. This means all of your PHI, your personal health information, is removed prior to sharing it outside of the registry. And the requested data is going to be assembled by registry staff, and they're going to be cleaning it. That should actually have the cleaning it. What that means is that the download will be done to hide all the identifiers, but then the people on the registry staff are actually going to look at the data line by line on the export and make sure that location like zip code is not downloaded. Any of the things that when you can take 2 or 3 or more of those little bits of information is actually removed completely from whatever format it's going to be supplying to the researchers. All of the staff at NORD and all of the registry staff are trained in good clinical practice that emphasizes that the privacy of participants like you is a trusted bond, and we really have to take care of that bond because it's sacred. And they're also trained in the adherence of good research methods. All of the registries on the platform must be under the guidance of an institutional review board, whose purpose is to assure that the rights and welfare of participants is protected. And all of the surveys, the study protocol, the consent forms, everything is reviewed by this independent board. If you would turn the slide, please. Medical professionals are dedicated to caring for the people in their care, but they just often don't have the time to just ask, how are you feeling? How are you coping? And the questions about you. By participating in a well-designed, participant-entered natural history study designed to collect the whole patient experience, you have a place to communicate what you feel is important about quality of life, what you want from a therapy, to say you're a person in addition to being a patient. So why should we build and participate in patient registries? A patient-centered registry will help to build community. You, the patient, will get to tell the story of your journey. You'll get to add your journey to the journeys of others that are similar to yours. And many voices together can make a compelling story to gain the attention from researchers. Patient registries are participant-entered, participant-centered, and participant-driven. Thank you. Appreciate being here today.
Thank you very much, Janet. That was a huge lift, and I know that disseminating all of this information into a couple slides takes a lot of care. So we appreciate how much you put into giving us your time today.
Thank you.
As someone who has considered looking into joining a registry, I know how much this context can mean. Even if you're a patient and caregiver and you're not someone who's looking to manage their own registry, there's a comfort that comes with knowing that your data is going to be safe and that it's going to be utilized to help others. I know this is something that our next speaker can definitely understand. Jeff Kramer, who's on screen now, if we don't mind going to the next slide, is the president of the Chondrosarcoma Foundation. He created the Chondrosarcoma Foundation to honor his daughter, Shana Kramer's legacy. Shana expressed a desire to educate the world about chondrosarcoma so she could help others suffering from this rare, deadly bone cancer. Shana lost her battle in November of 2019, and Jeffrey promised her he would create the Chondrosarcoma Foundation, and now is combining 24 years of experience in the healthcare education, communication, and marketing in order to broadcast all of the information that he has gathered on chondrosarcoma to us, patients and caregivers who it affects. So if you don't mind, I will turn the screen over to you, Jeff, to share your experience. And I also understand that you're giving us a bit of a sneak peek into some of your findings with your registry already, as an example of how this data can be used for those of us who are providing it.
Thank you so much. I have a rare opportunity here, and I want to take advantage of it to publicly thank Janet and also Kyra. I don't know if she's on, but the two of them initiated when we got involved in developing our patient registry and going through the onboarding process. We were involved in a cohort of about 5 foundations that were also starting their registries. And Janet and Kyra brought us and took us through the whole process. They kind of held our hand, and they helped us with templates and developing all the necessary tools that we needed to actually launch a patient registry. And I'm very grateful for their effort and for what they did. So I just want to take advantage of this to publicly thank you, Janet, for everything you've done for us. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for you. So I just wanted to start with that. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is our inspiration. This is my daughter, Shayna. And as Alexandria was saying, she passed away in November of 2019. As we went through our journey, which I refer to personally as a nightmare, Shayna struggled. She had her initial symptoms back in 2025, when she was about 26 or 25. And then she was misdiagnosed, and a period of time went before she was properly diagnosed. And then once she was diagnosed, she had major surgery on her spine, which was where it originated from. And then after that, she went, it was a period of about 2 years where she was doing fine, but then it metastasized and went everywhere. So as Alexandria was saying, she wanted to be an advocate, and I have had some background in developing organizations. I used to be an association executive for the alcohol and drug treatment industry, and I utilized those skills to develop the Chondrosarcoma Foundation. But I just, like many foundations, for me, this was a personal journey, and for many foundations, unfortunately, starts from a tragedy. And we're trying to honor the legacy of our daughter and everything that she stood for. She was a wonderful person. She was a special education teacher, and she was an assistant getting her master's to become a teacher. She had her whole life ahead of her, and unfortunately this ended up being a tragic situation. But we want to make good out of it by helping others and advocating on behalf of others and helping to contribute to finding a cure. And I think that's what our registry is all about. So can we go to the next slide? So we started our foundation in May of 2020 at the height of the pandemic. And we created the infrastructure to develop the foundation. And a little more than, or a little less than a year, we were figuring out, well, what are we going to do to serve chondrosarcoma patients? When we were going through our ordeal, we didn't really have resources and didn't have guidance, or we depended on our oncologist and what we needed to do to move forward. And we didn't have information that we could share to be part of the medical team and to make decisions that would help. We've learned a lot since then, but we wanted to figure out what we're going to do. How are we going to be a functional foundation? So we discovered NORD, and we discovered what they do, and as a result of that, we decided that we would, and we investigated very thoroughly. We vetted the I Am Rare patient registry platform, and we felt like, yeah, this is something we needed to invest in. And this isn't a cheap proposition. It does cost money. You do have to find, create a budget, and you do have to find funding resources in order to develop and maintain this registry platform. And what I did was, and this is based on some experience, I developed a 2-year budget, and I developed funding strategies. I approached our board, which we created, and I told them that we would personally match their donations. And then we reached out to some corporate funders to get the funding we needed to at least maintain the registry for 2 years. And since then, we've been successful in having that grow. Since we got it off the ground, but we needed at least 2 years to get it off the ground. We were the 44th foundation to join the I Am Rare platform, but we were the first foundation, and I can brag about this, to be on the I Am Rare 2.0 platform. And we were grateful for the opportunity to do that, and to be part of the I Am Rare platform. And we went through a onboarding process, which lasted about 6 months. And we'll go through the components of that. Can you go to the next slide, please? So these are the features of the registry, and I can just show them to you, rather than go through them point by point. But those are the things that we feature in our patient registry. And it's divided into, it's a questionnaire that's divided into sections. And there's about 70 questions that explore the topics that you see there, and help us to complete the registry. Let's move on to the next slide. So these are the components of the registry. The first thing that we had to do, which I think is very critical and important, is to create a study protocol. And this is kind of your research design. This is what you're going to do to actually identify what your rare disease, what your rare cancer is, talk about if there's subtypes, what the subtypes are. You need to talk about, how the literature. And one of the things about creating a study protocol, it's very important to be aware and involved with the existing literature, because your study and your patient registry is going to be based on a lot of the research that exists, the existing research. So it's important to become familiar. That doesn't mean you need to go through every single study that's out there, but you at least need to have enough information at your disposal that you can have a good foundation in which to build off of when you're developing your registry design. And in terms of creating the topics that you're trying to achieve through your registry. You also set your goals and your objectives, and they have to be, reasonable. They have to be to the point where you can reach them. So that's important to keep in mind too. The next part of a patient registry, and this is very important, is to create your informed consents. And informed consents are used in research studies because they outline to the participants and to the patients and the caregivers what the study is all about and what the expectations are. And it outlines in detail what what the experience of being part of the registry is going to be about, what's to their benefit, what's to our benefit, and it outlines all of those specifics within the informed consent. We were introduced in our training to two, the adult, and then they call it the LAR, and I think that stands for Legal Authorized Representative. And that would be a caregiver, somebody designated to that. And then I advocated very strongly that we included a retrospective informed consent, because we wanted folks like myself who had a daughter that passed away to also be part of the patient registry. And we were the first one to actually introduce the retrospective portion of the registry. And I believe other foundations are also adopting that and including folks who have also lost their battle as well. The next part of the patient registry, no, can you go back, please? Thank you. The next part of the patient registry is the data dictionary. And that's an outline of what specifically you're going to have. Like if you see over on the right-hand side, there's the questions, and that's sort of the sample of some of the questions that exist. And then that dictionary is actually going to abbreviate that registry. And those are things that we would pass on, that I ended up passing on to our statistician that we had to do our first analysis. So, and then the surveys and questionnaires are the component. Then that's what your participants are going to see, but they don't necessarily see all the questions of the questionnaires. They may see what we call branching logic, and if they answer a question a certain way, then they're going to see additional questions like follow-up questions that would follow up the surveys as they progress in each section. I'm ready for the next slide. So what I want to share with you is we launched our registry in March of 2023. Prior to that, we had what we call a soft launch, and we had about 10 people. Participate, and we came up with some issues that we needed to address and fix. But a year later, or a little more than a year later, we've come up with some results. What you see here, and what I want to point out here, is that only half of our sample, 50.3%, were aware of their particular subtype. And as you can see, we've got about 8 or 9 subtypes of chondrosarcoma. We determined that there was a real gap in the transfer of knowledge that patients have about chondrosarcoma. Let's go to the next slide. This is misdiagnosis. We found that about out of our sample, we had 41.1% of our patients who were misdiagnosed. And if you go to the next slide, this is where it becomes significant. You can see this time to event analysis. Within the registry, there were what we call date pickers. And it asked you, like, when did you first experience symptoms? What was the date and the year? It could have been the month, day, and year. And what we determined from our data analysis from time of events, that when a person first obtains symptoms to where they they seek medical assistance and they seek a doctor's care is 434 days. And you might ask yourself, well, why is that? And that's because we don't always recognize that we got a problem. It could be a lump, it could be pain, it could be restricted mobility. And if you're physically active, you could attribute it to, well, maybe I sprained an ankle, or I hurt my arm or something, and you're not really paying attention to it. So the average was 434 days. If you go to the next level, when you were diagnosed, first diagnosis might not have always been a chondrosarcoma diagnosis. And if it was misdiagnosed, the average was add 504 days to that, which is a large amount of time. That could be 2.5, 3 years. So, and then once you get a proper diagnosis to treatment, the average time was 82 days. And then if you see the last block there, after most of the time in our protocol was surgery. And if you look at the last part, from having recurrence or metastasis, it could be about 800 days. And if you go to the next slide. The next slide. So this is a preview, a sneak peek at what we're going to present in our poster at NORD at the summit. And I just wanted you to take a look at that. This is where we're at. I'll be there. I'll look forward to meeting you and want to encourage you to come talk. I can talk about these things and our results and their impact and implications in more detail when we meet there. And with that, I'm going to leave and thank you. That's how you can get a hold of me if you have any questions or want to talk further. I'm happy to help.
Thank you so much for sharing, Jeff. I know everyone can benefit from seeing some of these examples of, we say a few examples of what you can do with this data, but what you've been able to uncover already has been huge, especially in a short amount of time. I'd next like to turn to our next speaker, Denise Robinson, who's the Executive Director and Director of Research at the EAG Foundation. The EAG Foundation is the leading global advocacy nonprofit organization dedicated to finding treatments and a cure for epithelioid hemangioendothelioma. I apologize. By advancing research and driving collaboration among patients, researchers, and clinicians, EHE is an ultra-rare sarcoma that affects less than 1 in a million people. By harnessing patients' voices and experiences, the EHE Foundation is building a global research-ready patient community to improve outcomes for people diagnosed with this rare cancer. And I know that Denise can share with us a bit more about how she was able to connect with her patients and researchers through the process of running their own registry. Thank you, Denise. I'll turn this over to you.
Thanks, Alex. And yes, EHE is a mouthful to say and to spell. I want to thank NORD for giving us the opportunity for Jeff and I both to highlight our registries here today and talk about our patient communities. And I also have to echo Jeff's kudos to Janet and the registry team at NORD. If you are considering developing a registry, at a minimum, give a call and talk with them, because you'll find a wealth of information and guidance and leadership that can support you. There are a lot of questions. Questions are the reason that we started the registry to begin with. My journey is a little different in getting to know EHE as a disease. As Alex said, the disease affects less than 1 in a million people. So the likelihood that you or even a person who is diagnosed with EHE knows another person who's diagnosed with EHE, or their doctor knows anything about the disease is quite rare. So you can imagine that many patients, families that are affected by the disease are frantically searching for answers and circulating information, but that leaves still a lot of unanswered questions. And then clinicians and researchers don't benefit from that information. You have a lot of information in social media, information in independent journals, publications, and case studies. So it's really important to harness that structured data. My background comes from commercial clinical operations. So when I came to this foundation, putting data together was something that I was familiar with. And that led us to really start exploring different platforms. What questions did we want to answer? What are the most pressing questions? Because of course, we can't answer every question at once. So it is a long journey. And what I would say is that if you are representing a rare disease, a rare cancer, particularly because that's what we're focused on, I would encourage you to talk with others in your community, talk with your clinical trusted advisors, talk with researchers to understand some of the translational questions that could be helpful, and then explore how you can build surveys to answer that data, and then NORD can help you work through that. The last thing I want to say here, I know we're short on time, is that every single person, so every life that is affected by a rare disease, and of course a rare cancer makes a difference. These diseases are very different. They often affect people differently. EHE is certainly like that. So it takes a lot of people from all over the world, and literally anyone, anywhere on the planet can participate in the registry if they have access to technology. So I would encourage you to take the next step. It is a long building process, longer than you might think, and you'll want to get started. So talk to one of us or talk to NORD, and we'll be happy to answer questions. Alex, I'll turn it back over. I think we're getting close to time.
Thank you so much, Denise. I really appreciate it. And of course, we always have plenty of time. I know that I would like to hear more if possible, and I'm sure others would too who've already started submitting some questions. So if our panelists don't mind all coming back on camera, we will start diving into some of the questions that have been prepared for this panel. And as we receive more questions through the Q&A function, we will do our best to get to each of them. All right, I see that we have one question already. So first, I would like to ask Jeff and Denise, both of you, what were your first experiences with a patient registry when you first heard that term? What were some of your first thoughts, and what took you from those first thoughts to where you are now managing your own registries?
Denise, you go first.
A little bit of fright. We knew it was going to be a lift. It's a dedicated effort. It's a commitment, really, from your disease community. And as Janet pointed out, you need to have a couple of people who not only have the tenacity to get through the startup, but you need to be able to maintain it for the long term, because it does take years to learn the data, the answers. So I think that a little bit of fright, but you'll get over it.
I'll echo your thoughts and agree with you. It is a commitment. I guess, you know, we were in a learning mode from the beginning, and that was putting our foundation together, and we wanted to do something to contribute and make a significant contribution. And I think the registry is what's leading us in that direction. And so when we learned about NORD and about the I Am Rare platform, we obviously had a lot of questions, and we spent the time with NORD to learn about the registry and to address our questions, concerns, especially logistical things about how long it was going to take and how much money it was going to cost and things like that. And we got answers to our questions and enabled us to go further.
Thank you both. I think that falls perfectly in line with the experiences that you both shared. And it's amazing how many steps you've taken to go from one space to another. I see we have a couple questions that are in the same line. And I think both of you touched a little bit on it. But when we're looking at a budget for starting a registry, obviously everyone is different. But would you mind talking about how you arrived at a reasonable budget for this undertaking, and if you had any opportunities to help alleviate some of the costs?
You want me to take this one? Okay, so as I mentioned in my remarks, I wanted a 2-year budget because I wanted to ensure that we created the registry and we got it off the ground and we were able to do something with it. And I think that was a wise move on our part, because I also had, when we communicated the purpose and the intent and the goals behind the registry to people, and we said we had a budget, you know, we were able to communicate that, and we made our goals achievable. They were reasonable goals. And I think we were able to sell that and get people to buy into it. The first people that bought into it was the board, our board of directors. And then we got corporate sponsors. And we reached out to people who had a vested interest in our cause and in what we do. And we were able to convince them and have a dialogue with them about what we were doing and how we were doing it. And I want to add this. Janet mentioned a lot of different registries that are out there. With NORD, you get credibility. And when people out there, find that we are affiliated with NORD and we're part of the registry, that comes with a great deal of credibility, and it helped, at least for as far as we were concerned, it helped us, and it continues to help us. Not only are we presenting at NORD, we're also presenting at CTOS this year, which is the Connective Tissue Oncology Society. And so we have an opportunity to present before them as well.
Thank you, Jeff. It always makes me happy to hear some rave reviews for our registry team. I know they do excellent work. Speaking of credibility, we do have a couple questions regarding privacy when it comes to running a registry. The care that's taken into gathering and de-identifying that data. And Denise, I don't know if you would want to take that question, but as a second part of that question, we're wondering about when is a good time for a patient to be a part of a registry. Do they need to have a full diagnosis and have already gone through some treatments, or will they be able to update that information later?
Yeah, so privacy is certainly something that I take very seriously. I have a long career in research, and I can assure you that NORD has the back end technologically advanced to prevent intruders or what have you, as to the best of everyone's ability today. But as far as being able to just look at data, when patients are joining, you can only see, of course, your information. As an administrator of the registry, and Jeff and I have the same types of login access to each of our registries, but I can only see my data in my registry, and Jeff can only see his data in his registry. We can't cross over any other disease areas, and no one else in my organization can log in and see data in my registry. You have to have authorized access, as Janet mentioned. You have to have your good clinical practice certification. You have to be trained in order to get access into the registry. And there are a couple of steps in that process. It's not something that I can say from our foundation's perspective. We would just simply have a volunteer who said, "Oh, could I look in your registry?" Or someone, even a researcher who said, even if it's someone you trust, could I look in there and see if there's anybody that looks like this? No, you can't do that. We don't let those things happen. And I think all registry owners take that seriously. The second question that the person asked regarding when is a good time to join, I encourage everyone at diagnosis. But if you have long-lived disease, we just started our registry last year. If you have long-lived disease and you've had your disease for 10 years, you should join the registry and tell all of the interventions, treatments that you've had along the way. But for newly diagnosed people who many won't get treatment right away, it's important to go ahead and set that baseline and come in, and then you'll get, from our registry standpoint, the way we built it is you'll have a 6-month opportunity to update every 6 months. Any treatments or changes in your disease. And I think that's standard with a lot of registries. You can come back and keep updating your information. So really important, wherever you are in your journey, just to take the next step and join.
And this information is dependent on the registry. There are some diseases where the diagnostic journey is so long, they want to capture that. So if a doctor suspects that you have a particular disease or condition, the registry for your particular syndrome may actually want you to join pre-diagnosis. We can only speak to the NORD registry platform in terms of security. But I believe that most do keep it private. But that's why I said, read your consent forms, read your contracts if you're the advocacy group, and make it clear when you're developing things for your participants how you're going to protect their privacy.
Thank you very much. If there's no other thoughts on any of these questions, I think we might move into our closing. I can't stress enough how grateful we are that each of our panelists took the time that they have to spend with us this afternoon, as well as all the preparation that went into this webinar for weeks ahead of time. If we haven't gotten to your question yet, please feel free to reach out to us at membership@rarediseases.org. We'll do our best to get answers for you. If not from this panel, it'll be from one of our other subject matter experts. We're always happy to help and try and point you in the right direction. I do want to take a quick moment before we say goodbye to talk about our Rare Cancer Coalition, which is made up of all of our rare cancer specific members here at NORD. It was formalized in 2017 under the NORD membership umbrella. I've had the pleasure to work with them over the last year, and I can honestly say that it is an organization that works hard to try and determine and alleviate any of the barriers that patient and caregivers who are touched by rare cancers are experiencing. So if you are part of a patient advocacy organization, you're interested in learning more about the Rare Cancer Coalition, we're always happy to speak with you. And if you're a patient or caregiver who's been affected by rare cancers, I would implore you to visit this website, see if any of our members are offering services and support that might affect your disease state. They're really wonderful people. I know that they'll do the best that they can to meet you where you are. And with that, thank you again, everyone who has joined us. I know we went a little over time, but we also started a little bit late. So hopefully you've been able to spend the 50 minutes with us. If not, we will see you on Rare Cancer Day, September 30th in this recording. We wish you all the best and hope to speak with you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday.